Good evening and welcome to the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Tonight we are bringing you an exclusive report here on the show about what's going on in the state of Missouri in regard to abortion rights being under attack. Now, when I initially went on assignment to go do this report to cover what's happening in the state of Missouri, this was initially going to be broadcasted as a special report. But over the course of creating this and doing interviews, I was made aware of some exclusive information that has not been publicly reported nationally or anywhere else. And we're going to be broadcasting that information to you for the first time in full detail tonight. So please be sure to stay tuned for that. But to understand what's going on in the state of Missouri right now, you have to really dig into their history because it kind of makes sense. The history of abortion rights in Missouri is one of twists and turns and trials and tribulations. And it is really a story that is fraught and horrific. It was in 1821 that President James Monroe signed federal legislation officially making Missouri the 24th state of the Union. And 4 years later, the state legislature passed a law making it a criminal felony to administer any poisonous or noxious substances to procure a marriage. So essentially, this was Missouri's introduction into the Union, passing a law to criminalize women and restricting abortion. By 1835, they had flat out made abortion illegal in the state of Missouri. The only exceptions were to save the life of a mother, but no exceptions for rape or incest. You could also be charged with manslaughter, and this was all because the Missouri legislature, run by fully men, thought, well, this is the best way to do it because essentially, if we pass this law and other laws in the future, we are going to be protecting women in the state. We're going to be protecting the health of females. But of course, these restrictive abortion laws did not stop women from getting abortions. They just were getting them through surreptitious and usually unsafe channels. For instance, in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, this woman here, who is known as Doc Annie, Dr. Annie Smith performed abortions on women even though it was illegal, and she could face prosecution, but that did not stop her. She saved the lives of countless women. And we know that per historical record, essentially that her and her husband were legitimate physicians who were also treating cases like tuberculosis. But she was doing what she thought was right at the time in this house. This house here is where she saved countless women when Missouri had made abortion illegal in the state and you could face prosecution for it. When Missouri made abortion illegal, many women were effectively going to die, and she knew that. And so this here was a 1923 paper ad in the Poplar Bluff Republican advertising her services for local women in the area. To many, she was a hero, and to others, a butcher. Specifically the anti-abortion movement, who tried to throw her in jail twice. When 2 of her patients had unsuccessfully attempted a self-induced abortion, they came to her for care and subsequently died from complications. And of course, under Missouri law, she was charged with manslaughter, even though it was self-induced wounds that she tried to fix, but she was still targeted for it. But the charges did not stick. In both cases, the Missouri Supreme Court cleared her a full essentially, they cleared her slate completely of all charges, saying that she was not, to blame here. There was not enough proof to charge Dr. Annie. And so she continued her work. She ultimately died in 1962. And even then, still, the fight for unrestricted access to abortion in the state of Missouri continued. When Roe v. Wade was decided in a 7-3 Supreme Court decision, a landmark decision, abortion became legal in Missouri. But this was a constant battle. In 1976, the Supreme Court struck down Missouri abortion regulations that required written consent from women's husbands if she was married. In 1979, a Missouri court struck down a statute requiring abortions after 12 weeks to be performed in only hospitals. Same thing happened in 1983 when the Supreme Court called it an unreasonable infringement on a woman's right to choose. It remained a legal and legislative battle for years. The number of abortion clinics in Missouri went from 29 in 1989 to 12 in 1992. In 2019, this guy on your screen here, the state-appointed health director to the Republican governor Mike Parson, instituted a policy that all women seeking an abortion would have to undergo an unnecessary pelvic exam. So just to be clear here, all women in the state of Missouri would have to get an unnecessary vaginal inspection before they could receive an abortion. It was disgusting and led to massive outrage here. This made national news. And, lots of outrage, essentially from the clinics and the doctors who had to perform this. A doctor from Planned Parenthood called it a, quote, state-sanctioned sexual assault. And ultimately, that policy was ended after more than 100 women received this invasive, repulsive exam. It was just a few months later, of course, that in 2019, that same state health director started tracking women's periods in Missouri. This was a headline from the Kansas City Star, quote, Missouri health director kept spreadsheet of Planned Parenthood patients' periods. This is the state health director, and he kept a spreadsheet of women's periods? Why? For what? This was him admitting to it in a hearing.
And in the last column there, it includes the department's calculation of the woman's last normal period, right? Yes, sir.
Yes. We were tracking women's periods in the state of Missouri. That is Dr. Randall Williams there admitting in a hearing that yes, they were tracking women's periods in the state of Missouri. They literally had a spreadsheet to track the menstrual cycles of women in the state of Missouri, in addition to also ordering an unnecessary vaginal inspection. Think about how repugnant that is there. After receiving so much national outrage and pushback and dissent, it wasn't until 2021 that he finally resigned, that Dr. Randall Williams finally resigned. Then Republican Governor Mike Parson gave no response or reason as to why he resigned, but I mean, come on, it's pretty clear. When Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022, Missouri became the first state to ban abortion. They did it within minutes of the Supreme Court order, and basically it had activated their trigger law designed to take effect immediately if Roe was overturned, and so it happened. The governor proudly declared that they were a pro-life state now, banning all abortions with no exception for rape or incest, but only to save the life of a mother. And anyone who did perform the procedure, you could be charged and face up to 15 years in prison. Missouri patients were immediately forced to travel out of state, often to Illinois or Kansas, to access abortion care. Last year in 2024, Missourians had a chance to reverse that and basically to enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution and also give thousands of workers paid sick leave. And they won 51% to 48%, with more than 1.5 million voters casting their ballots to approve the measure. It was a huge occasion at the time. They were very exuberant about this, the fact that this passed, that abortion rights were going to be enshrined into the state constitution after not just years of abortion being effectively banned in the state again, but also after a history that has been nothing but degrading women in the state of Missouri and criminalizing abortion, which is healthcare. 9 days into Donald Trump's second term in office, Missouri Republican Congressman Eric Burleson introduced a bill to ban abortion nationwide. And he called it the Life at Conception Act. And it got 70 co-sponsors. It almost got 70 co-sponsors. And the legislation argued that a fetus is a person under the 14th Amendment. This is something that has been deeply embedded in the conservative movement, not just to ban abortion nationwide, but also to argue that a fetus is a person. So we should amend the 14th Amendment to put that in there. Therefore, it would give us, essentially more power to restrict women's reproductive rights. And what Congressman Burleson introduced is consistent with Project 2025 to call for a nationwide abortion ban, because that's something that we should have in the United States. And it's something that Republicans have been trying to do for a while now. It's something that they really have been trying to do for a while. And in that congressman's home state of Missouri, it wasn't just about him trying to introduce legislation to ban abortion nationwide, but it's also what local Republicans were doing in that state around the same time. There is now a real fight over the amendment that voters went to the polls last year to approve last November to enshrine reproductive rights and paid sick leave, basically for all Missourians. And Republicans have just passed a referendum seeking to reverse that. According to reporting from ProPublica, the proposed amendment would ban abortion except for in medical emergencies when a fetus has abnormalities or in cases of rape or incest, with rape or incest cases requiring a police report and subject to a 12-week limit. It would also prohibit public funding for abortions. What's more, it would ban providing surgeries, hormones, or drugs to assist a child with a gender transition, procedures that are already illegal in Missouri. Understand what this means here. This would effectively put an abortion ban back on the ballot in the state of Missouri, something that Missourians just voted for last year in overwhelming numbers. 1.5 million Missourians showed up, 51 to 48%, to enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution and to give residents in the state paid sick leave. Republicans have just sought to reverse that. And there has been widespread visceral outrage about this and protest. And we can understand why.
I better not hear anybody in this chamber claim to speak for the people or care about the people or we the people or the voice of the people or listen to the people. The people have spoken twice. And we're telling them to shut up.
We say believe and trust women, and here we don't even believe and trust when they vote for things that help their bodies.
Fuchs also says every Missourian should be worried about the value of their vote.
The Missouri legislature takes it upon themselves to undo that and to undermine the will of the voters. It doesn't matter who's in charge. If we set that precedent, does that continue? Absolutely, it is a coup. Yeah. It is a coup on fundamental rights.
That was Democratic State Representative Elizabeth Fuchs, who was elected last year at the same time that Missourians voted to approve this amendment. Of course, you can see the protest in the state capitol, as well as Representative Fuchs speaking about this and basically what Republicans have just done to overturn the will of the voters here, and how insane this is. How this is basically an attack on representative democracy. I mean, when you think about voting for initiatives or for people who are going to most affect your life, or, initiatives that are most going to affect your life, that is your local government. That's what happens. But Republicans in the state of Missouri have just voted to overturn the will of voters. While it is not surprising, it is deeply, deeply disturbing. And since that report, the Missouri Supreme Court has reinstated an abortion ban in the state. We reached out to Representative Fuchs for an interview, and I'm going to guide you through our discussion here and interject every so often, especially because there is some major breaking news in this interview. But here it is. What was your initial reaction to Republicans seeking to overturn Amendment 3 after residents voted to approve it last year?
Not surprised. Unfortunately, I've been working in the legislature, not as a representative or an elected official, but in Missouri politics, really since 2004, when I knocked my first door for marriage equality, when we were looking at a marriage amendment on the Constitution, which did pass by 70% back in 2004. So I'm not surprised that the ballot initiative is being used to undermine and weaponize again the rights of Missourians, and to use the legislature and the supermajority, the Republican-held supermajority, to kind of bully their way through. So I wasn't surprised, disappointed, of course. You move through all the stages of grief, right? So rage, was a big part of it. I did get kicked off the Senate floor when the Senate PQ'd the legislation that brought HJR 73, which is the bill that is going to bring this issue back to Missouri voters. Proud of our activist and advocate organizations for being ready in the gallery of the Senate to drop banners and chant. And so as they started chanting, I was like, well, here we go. And I'm on the Senate floor and I started chanting with them. And then I got kicked off. Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman was like, you, and security was like, out of here. And so you go through all like the emotions, mad as hell, you know what I'm saying? And I hope Missourians really start to make this connection to what they want and who they vote for, and if those things are continuing to be in alignment.
Do you believe that there was a real strategy effort on the ground last year with Democrats picking up seats in order to protect Amendment 3 and how it would have gone about?
With the last, I would say there's been a concerted effort almost the last decade or more to pick up House seats, to pick up Senate seats for the Democrats. There has been some success in picking up seats. I would say where the success was this last time was we didn't lose any. Trump won Missouri by a lot. And so to consider that we had districts where we needed to keep them blue and they also were going to vote for, a Republican governor and a Republican president, but perhaps they liked their House member and so we have a lot of purple-ish districts that we needed to keep. And so we were successful at keeping all of our seats. We didn't lose any, but we didn't gain any, even though some of the races were really close. And I think with some targeted messaging this time. And so the strategy, was to pick up seats. And I think with the red wave, if you will, we were lucky to not lose them.
So once again, me speaking to Representative Elizabeth Fuchs, newly elected Democrat in the state of Missouri. That is the beginning of our interview, essentially getting her reaction to this here. Missouri has a hostile and frankly vituperative person for Attorney General. Republican Andrew Bailey is a prominent figure in the state's anti-abortion initiatives. He has sued Planned Parenthood in the state, accusing the organization of facilitating out-of-state abortions for minors without parental consent. That lawsuit is based off of a video which Planned Parenthood says is heavily doctored to fit Bailey's claim. In addition to this, though, he has also been persistent in wanting access to women's medical records. He subpoenaed the Missouri Abortion Fund and Planned Parenthood to give up those records on every single woman seeking an abortion in the state. Earlier this month, Bailey won in court, and they had to hand over those records. They have tried to stop it, essentially by contesting, essentially saying that this is a violation of HIPAA. The court has denied it, and they have to hand over those highly sensitive records. I asked Representative Fuchs about Attorney General Andrew Bailey, and while speaking with her, we came across some bombshell news that we frankly were not expecting. Watch.
Andrew Bailey is a dangerous man. All right, let's be clear. Like, he is dangerous. The way he views people's bodies and his ability to govern them, dangerous. I listened to some of your work, so I know that you're not afraid of saying the hard things. These are white supremacists in charge of our state, and they are still. So the way Missouri organized, originally 1820, we were admitted to the Union as a slave state because Maine was admitted as a free state. And then by 1861, the Union Army storms Jefferson City, our capital. And before that, though, the pro-Confederacy governor and his team flee the capital and head south. So here the Union then takes over. Now the northern half of Missouri is free, and the southern half is the 12th state in the Confederacy. These people, they're still up to the same thing. It's just a different script. It's a different formula. It's different messaging. Same control of bodies, same. And now, because we're looking at so much beautiful blended families, And so now we're like, yeah, great, pregnant white teenagers in rural Missouri. Let's child marriage. Let's like, because there's this like desire and need, right, for like more white babies, more white babies. And so like there should be no interference of the government in my body and in what's happening when it comes to, you know, some of the documents for joining the high school band are asking for students' menstruation information. I know this for a fact, like for a fact. So why does the high school band need to know about the band members' menstrual cycles? Why? 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 Why?
Once again, that is Democratic State Representative Elizabeth Fuchs telling us that a Missouri high school band program is requiring students to hand over records about their menstrual cycles as a requirement to join the high school band. This news is exclusive to us. It is obviously it is a major story here. It is so astonishing and gut-wrenching that we did reach back out to Representative Fuchs after the interview basically to confirm that this is actually happening because it is so horrific here. And she did confirm that a trusted source told her directly after a parent completed paperwork, quote, "I do not know if it's been made an official policy of the district or if it's just on the application to participate in the band," end quote. Now, we did reach out to the ACLU of Missouri and the communications department at the St. Louis Public Schools. The ACLU of Missouri has told us that they are looking into this to see if this is a situation that is currently happening or if it has happened in the past. The St. Louis Public Schools communications department has responded to the Jeremiah Patterson Show's media inquiry. The executive director of public affairs, Charles K. Pohl, has responded to the Jeremiah Patterson Show by saying, "Hello, I checked with our district's director of nursing and we are not aware of any such activity as a practice throughout the state, nor is it a practice within our district." End quote. Once again, that is from the executive director of public affairs telling our show tonight exclusively that they do not believe that this is happening. Once again, the ACLU of Missouri has told us that they're looking into this. Representative Fuchs told us that she heard this news from a trusted source, essentially that it was actually a requirement, a part of paperwork for parents filling this out for their children to be in the high school band. So we're looking into this more essentially to try to pinpoint where exactly this is happening, who required this, why such information is even being asked of when it comes to young teenage girls in the state of Missouri. I mean, this is enraging. It is repulsive. It is stomach turning. I mean, just think about this news for a second here. A Missouri high school band program is requiring, in order for students to join the high school band, that they hand over information about their menstrual cycles. Why does the high school band need to know about that? Why does the high school band need to know about the period cycles of young teenage girls in order for them to join the band? Why is that a requirement? Why is that necessary documents that you need to submit before you can join and play an instrument? Who required that be a check mark? Was it someone on the band staff? Was it one of the band directors? Who required that? This is deeply, deeply concerning information. And we are going to continue to stay on this here at the Jeremiah Patterson Show because it is horrific. If you or anyone you know has information about this, if your child has been subjected to this, if you are a parent in Missouri and you have physically seen this on documentation, please reach out to our show, tjpsnews@gmail.com, as we continue to investigate this and doing our due diligence here as an investigative journalist outlet to make sure that the truth gets out. And so such vituperative and disgusting behavior can cease. We are going to continue to stay on this. We are going to continue to chase this story because it deserves national attention, frankly. We'll be right back. The Jeremiah Patterson Show is an independent news media platform. If you want to see more special reports like this, please consider becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack at TJPS News. When you become a paid subscriber, you'll get immediate access to exclusive content, opinion pieces, the upcoming Resistance podcast, and The More You Know, a series focused on diving deeper behind the headlines with historical context. One viewer who upgraded said, quote, "Your show is insightful, thought-provoking, and engaging. You shed light on key issues, inspire conversations, and tell impactful stories. Your passion and dedication shine through in every piece, keeping me informed and inspired," said Dr. Lisa. "I do this because it matters, because the investigative journalism is imperative, and most of all, I'm unabashed and unafraid to tell the truth." Upgrade now from free to paid for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. Once again, we are back, continuing to follow that extremely disturbing breaking news that a Missouri high school band program is requiring students essentially to give over records regarding their menstrual cycles to join the high school band. It is extremely disturbing. It is horrific. We are following this story closely, and we will continue to follow the story closely. We're going to have more details coming for you in the days to come as we continue to chase this. I did finish the interview with Representative Fuchs. Here's the rest of that interview now.
But I don't see any reason for the government to have any reason to be in our exam rooms at all when it comes to gender affirming care, when it comes to abortion access, when it comes to any of the like. And the fact that here in Missouri, our Attorney General keeps trying to access patients' private medical records. I've said it before. I don't know if they're making Gilead, Missouri, but I'm a fight to the end to make sure that that pro-Confederacy doesn't get to stay in charge for long. You know what I'm saying?
I wanted to ask you here lastly, is there a new strategy, I guess, in the works, sort of behind the scenes and publicly by Missouri Democrats to meet the public where they are in terms of protecting abortion rights in the state? A strategy for the midterms and picking up more Democratic seats, potentially getting a majority to protect abortion rights. Is there a new strategy among advocacy groups and members in the state legislature to really hone in here?
I think there is, and it's going to have to be flexible. We're still seeing what the courts are doing. When it comes to what the new, are we playing an offensive game? Are we playing a defensive game? Are we playing both? It really comes down to, so I'm a social worker. So when you say meeting people where they are, that's one of our social work theories, is to meet people where they are. So in Missouri, people will vote for things like Proposition A, which was also overturned on the last day of the Senate session in the Senate, and that was to give people paid medical leave, and so folks on the other side of the aisle stood on the House floor and basically said, "I'm a small business owner, and the voters aren't going to tell me what to do with my business." I mean, and I'm not like paraphrasing. Like, those are the actual words they used. So now we have voters who have voted for things like paid medical leave, access to abortion, and people who voted to overturn those things. So they voted for, both of those things, and the same person who voted to overturn what they voted on. So we can't, as much as we want, like when I sit on the agriculture committee and I hear my colleagues talk about how hard it is for farmers, and I want to be like, yeah, have the day you voted for. I can't be, because I have to be empathetic and be like, yeah, huh? How are we going to help the farmers? Probably not voting for these people over and over again, right? Like, we can't show up in community this summer because we do have a strategy, but like Art of War says, we ain't telling it. Um, to be in every district this summer as Missourians. Not necessarily as Democrats, not as Republicans, as Missourians who are concerned about the future of our state. And hopefully, then we have enough conversations with people to get them to change who they vote for in the midterms. And that's maybe not this generation. It might take a whole nother generation, which is, I mean, I'm in it for the long haul, but I hope that we're able to at least gain a few seats in the midterms. But things are going to have to get pretty ugly for Missourians, and that doesn't make me happy. Like it's going to have to get hard for people for them to, I think, actually kind of break away from the wait a minute. Because I don't have paid sick leave and I lost my job and we're trying to figure out how to pay rent now because Representative so and so voted to overturn that and I could have had some paid sick leave. So I can't vote for him again. Like why would I vote for him again? I'm about to lose my so we have to help people come to that and it's not going to be like this. Like oh but we wanna because yeah. But shame's not going to get us to flip seats. And we need to break the Republican held supermajority in this state.
Access to abortion in the state of Missouri is still barely happening. Despite the briefness of Amendment 3, residents are still having to travel out of state. One of the provisions in Amendment 3 is basically allowing abortions up until viability. Now, what is viability? It is a legal limit drawn at the point a fetus is thought to be able to survive on its own, typically between 22 and 24 weeks. Allowing abortion up until that point is still effectively an abortion ban. According to reporting from the New Republic, that provision was included essentially so that the amendment could pass. In order to get a better understanding of that provision, Amendment 3, and the path forward here, I spoke with Banyan Lee Gilmore, a co-founding member of What's Next for Missouri.
So, I mean, I think what we're talking about is the use of direct democracy to try and win progressive change at the state level. But what we have to remember is that direct democracy, or what we call ballot measures, which is putting a question to the voters to vote for, is a tactic. And it can bring a lot of progressive change and has in states like Missouri. But when it comes to abortion rights, it doesn't actually work that way because we actually didn't change the face of power in our state. And so what they did was enshrined abortion rights with limitations, right? The state constitution now only protects abortion up until viability. If you don't know what viability is, it's this vague point in time that a fetus could likely survive outside of the womb. Medical experts like the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists oppose viability limits because it is not an arbitrary point in a pregnancy and it's hard to determine. And so who gets to judge at the end of the day whether a provider has followed the letter of the law? The Attorney General. And our Attorney General in the state of Missouri is one of the most hostile anti-abortion actors in the country. Our legislature has an anti-abortion supermajority. Our governor is anti-abortion. And so we can talk about ballot measures as one tactic, but it never had a strategy behind it. And so what you're seeing today in Missouri is abortion remains inaccessible. It might be a right on paper, but it is inaccessible. And the restrictions have been reinstated by the state Supreme Court. And abortion is effectively banned in our state, despite a $31 million ballot measure.
What we've seen is, yes, this passed, but Republicans have now rewritten the rules. And so that's where we are here. I wanted to ask you about, because as it says on your shirt, viability bans are bans. When these amendments are written for, to be passed, why is it that this language is included, because it's still technically, restricting abortion in some sense. There's lots of Americans who don't support, bans on abortion at all throughout a woman's entire pregnancy.
Yeah. Well, this is a great question. And I think the simple answer is we're seeing abortion rights advocates default to fear and conventional wisdom around later abortion. But if we look at the latest, most recent research done on public opinion and public perspectives around later abortion, abortions in the third trimester, and most importantly, the role of government in pregnancy decision-making, the vast majority of people, Republican, independents, and Democrats, all say they want government out of pregnancy decision-making, including in the third trimester. So we had and have an opportunity in a post-Roe world to rewrite the laws in a way that includes people who need abortions throughout pregnancy, for poor people who rely on Medicaid for care, for young people, for rural people. And that requires us to be bold in our policy language. And it also requires voters to read the policies that they're being asked to support. Mm-hmm. Because Amendment 3 is one of 10 ballot measures in 2024, 7 of which had viability limits or some sort of gestational age ban on abortion. And that's just not what the majority of Americans want to see.
Mm. In regard to what we're seeing in terms of in Republican states, the ban on abortion rights, one of the things that was interesting to me to learn recently was the conservative, the movement on the right. Also, the goal is to essentially, fetal personhood, which is something that has been, not relatively known or spoken about, but that's their ultimate goal. We've seen cases like, a young Black woman in Georgia still being on, still being kept alive in some form, even though she's clinically brain dead. But because there is, I wanted to ask you about this movement as a whole, and if you think Democrats have recognized the danger in that, because they're not just going to stop here.
Yeah, well, I'm really glad that you brought up Adriana Smith's case in Georgia. She's the woman that is being kept alive on life support despite being clinically brain dead because she's pregnant. And in 30 states in this country, advanced directives, people's desires of what would happen if they become brain dead or in a coma, those advanced directives are overridden by the state if you're pregnant in 30 states. And that's because, like you said, personhood laws in state laws. What is personhood? Personhood is the legal concept that gives fetuses, embryos, and zygotes rights like people. It makes it's the government's ability to recognize fetuses, embryos, and zygotes as people with rights. That's what fetal personhood is. And so to connect this to the question about viability limits and gestational bans in abortion, you have to understand that any line that you're drawing in abortion rights is a line that the state has to police. And that line tells the state when that fetus or embryo, depending on when that gestational ban is, tells the state that that fetus now has some sort of rights. And that's what leads to cases like Adriana Smith. It leads to cases like the people that we've seen this year be criminalized for stillbirths and miscarriages. So it's important to understand that abortion laws have a much broader impact on pregnant people, far beyond abortion seekers. It impacts people with wanted pregnancies. It impacts people with pregnancy outcomes like stillbirths and miscarriages. And it leads to the criminalization of pregnant people. And so the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do you believe that a pregnant person deserves to go to jail at any point in pregnancy? Mm-hmm. And if the answer is no, then you need to be supporting laws that do not draw any lines, no bans, no restrictions on abortion or any sort of pregnancy decision making. The pregnant person should have bodily autonomy and the freedom to make those decisions. Otherwise, we are on a slippery slope to criminalization. And that's not hyperbole and it's not hypothetical. We are seeing it play out more and more in real time.
I wanted to ask you about the provision in Amendment 3 that essentially allows the state government to regulate or restrict abortion after fetal viability, and essentially the language that is in this and how this could lead to the criminalization of women in the state.
Yeah, I mean, if you read Amendment Three's language, it says plain as day, it allows the state government to regulate abortion after fetal viability. So if you remember what I said earlier, anytime you draw a line, the government has to police that line. When the government is invited to police people, they surveil them. And that has a disproportionate impact on people of color. We all know that when we watch police violence play out in our communities. We know they target Black and brown people. We know that insurance bans in our state, which still remain on the books today, despite Amendment 3, has a disproportionate impact on people with low incomes, which is disproportionately made up of women and people of color because of the systemic discriminatory laws and policies in our country, right? So Amendment 3, it was an incredible opportunity to win something big. And it is an unfortunate bipartisan created problem that it drew a line in pregnancy and invites the government in. And that's what we're seeing play out today. The state Supreme Court reinstated all those restrictions, and probably constitutionally can, because the Constitution says that the government can regulate. So it didn't go far enough, and we are back to square one in the state of Missouri. But this story kind of applies to many of the states that passed ballot measures with viability limits. We are not seeing providers expand access to care. People who need abortions later in pregnancy still have to travel out of their home states for care. It remains expensive and it remains inaccessible. And this is a bipartisan created problem. I have never known a Republican to write a law that allows abortions up until viability. The only side of this political spectrum that I have seen front for laws that write abortion rights up until viability are Democrats and progressives. So Democrats and progressives are working in tandem with Republicans who want to win fetal personhood. So these two things work together to criminalize people and force medical treatments against their will. And it's a serious problem. Project 2025 lays it out. We know they want to amend the 14th Amendment of the US Constitution to recognize fetuses as having equal rights. So the right is doing their thing, but the left is actually helping them by telling them at what point in which states they can begin to recognize fetal rights.
In regard to that assistance from Democrats, what do you think should be next in terms of educating voters on, what exactly certain amendments are, or restrictions like viability? What do you think should be next here in terms of going forward, especially for the state of Missouri?
Well, we like to tell our community to ask hard questions when advocates on either side of the aisle ask you to support something. When it comes to a reproductive freedom law, ask, does this protect everyone, especially people with low incomes, later abortion seekers, and young people? Ask that question explicitly. Know to ask that question. And find out whether there are any limitations that allow the government to interfere in pregnancy decision. I think that's really the starting point, right? People need to feel empowered to ask that question. What I find in talking about this across the country is that we as progressives still don't necessarily have the muscle yet to ask our own people hard questions. We're really, really used to just pointing the finger across the aisle and saying it's Trump's fault or it's the Republicans' fault. But as a reproductive justice advocate for 10 years now, I can tell you that the progressive side has played its hand and its role in speeding up the criminalization of pregnant people. And so I think this question is my favorite question because I want voters, I want the American people to understand that they have the power to ask these questions of our own before you support them, before you write a check, before you go door knocking for their campaign. Ask these questions and understand what it is you're supporting.
Once again, my guest is Bunyan Lee Gilmore. She's a co-founding member of What's Next for Missouri. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I did ask Representative Fuchs about if she would support rewriting Amendment 3 to eliminate the provisions banning abortion after viability and allowing the state to regulate or restrict access to it. Here's what she told me. Would you support rewriting the amendment to eliminate these harmful provisions and ensure true justice and equity?
I would, and I don't know if there's any rewriting this amendment as it is now. Like it passed out of the Senate, and by barring any legal, which I'm sure there's going to be lots of legal between now and when it hits the ballot actually in 2026, I imagine there will be a lot of legal disputes over this, over HJR 73 specifically. That is one of the intentions, I believe, is to harm and to further victimize, marginalize, and already disproportionately impacted communities, and we have if not the lowest, one of the lowest rates of survivorship for Black birthing people and infants in this state. We know the dangers, which is why people fight so hard in this state. I'd be interested in more than rewriting it. I want to do like this and just
Once again, Representative Fuchs is not just in favor of rewriting the amendment. She is in favor of ripping up the amendment completely and starting over, as abortion is now banned in the state. And essentially a new ballot initiative is set to be presented to voters again next year in the midterms. So once again, we're following this story and others closely as we're watching the fight for reproductive rights in the state of Missouri continue. I do appreciate all of you for watching this special report tonight on the Jeremiah Patterson Show, this exclusive. Once again, if you have any information about what's going on in the state of Missouri regarding that exclusive news that we broke here tonight about a Missouri high school band program requiring students to give over information regarding their menstrual cycles, please email the Jeremiah Patterson Show, tjpsnews@gmail.com for additional details, any insight you can give us, documentation, audio, testimonials. Please be sure to give that information to our show as we continue to chase this story and those horrifically disturbing reports. Thank you so much for watching this report. Please be sure to share it with your family and friends. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to comment any suggestions, your questions, or your thoughts on this video. If you're a fan of the Jeremiah Patterson Show, please recommend it to your family and friends. You can also support us by donating financially, as this is independent journalism and we rely on your donations to continue this crucial work. Another way you can support my work is by becoming a paid subscriber to my Substack at TJPS News for just $7.99 a month or $75 a year. I will see you again tomorrow. Be sure to follow us on Blue Sky and Substack at TJPS News. If you have any questions, news topic requests, or want to do a collaboration, you can email me at tjpsnews@gmail.com.